All right, let's dive right into this explainer and unpack the incredible, basically Game of Thrones style epic of the state of Yan. Honestly, if you think you know political drama, just wait. We are looking at a massive saga of survival, deep betrayal, and ultimate vengeance that spanned almost a millennium in ancient China. We're going to trace exactly how this tiny state, sandwiched between absolute superpowers, managed to hold its ground, completely lose everything, rise from the ashes, and then eventually face a truly tragic doom. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll quickly cover their benevolent roots, the great abdication blender, their glorious revenge, desperation and annihilation, and finally, wrap up with the secret to their survival. Starting right off with Section 1, the benevolent roots of Yan. So, when King Wu of the Zhou dynasty granted this northern territory to Duke Shao, he wasn't just dropping a typical aristocratic ruler into an ivory tower. Duke Shao deeply understood the power of grassroots justice. He actually became famous for traveling through all these local villages, sitting down under a sweet pear tree, known as the gantung, and just hearing cases from everyone. We're talking the highest nobles down to the lowest commoners. He made sure perfect justice was served so that absolutely no one lost their livelihood. And he created this profound goodwill, right? So much so that long after his death, the people fiercely protected that tree. They literally refused to let anyone cut it down and even wrote poems about it. Looking at the timeline, you can see how this foundation builds. That initial love from the people bought Yan's centuries of stability. It gave them this solid bedrock of loyalty that lets us just breeze past generations of rulers, right through the hegemon era and straight into the brutal, super cutthroat era we know as the Warring States period. But of course, stability can kind of breed complacency, which brings us to Section 2, the Great Abdication Blunder. The sheer irony of this situation is just off the charts. So King Kwai of Yan wanted to go down in history like the legendary sage king Yao. Now, Yao famously offered his kingdom to a humble sage, fully knowing the guy would refuse it. It was a brilliant PR move. He got the reputation for immense virtue without actually losing any power. Well, King Kwai tries to copy this exact playbook. He hands his absolute power over to his minister, Zi Zhi, fully expecting to just look incredibly virtuous. But plot twist, Zi Zhi actually takes the power. King Kwai accidentally surrenders his own throne, totally sidelines himself, and completely alienates his own crown prince. And as you might guess, giving away your kingdom to an ambitious minister really doesn't sit well with the actual heir to the throne. This spectacular executive failure sparked a devastating civil war between the minister and the crown prince. The state just plunged into absolute chaos, leaving tens of thousands of citizens dead. And the worst part? All this internal bleeding allowed the rival, incredibly powerful state of Qi to casually march right in, invade, and easily crush the weakened state of Yan. But they weren't done yet. Section 3, a glorious revenge, rebuilding from the ashes. Out of the wreckage of that catastrophic invasion, the surviving crown prince steps up and takes the throne as King Zhao, and he is armed with one singular obsessive goal: total vengeance against Qi. But think about it. How does a ruined, bankrupt state defeat a superpower? King Zhao desperately asks his advisor, Go Wei, how to recruit the top strategic talent in the world to help him rebuild. And Go Wei brilliantly replies, if you want to attract scholars, start with me. He essentially tells the king, look, treat me with absurd amounts of respect. Build me a palace, be my student. When the real geniuses of the world see how well you treat just an average guy like me, they are going to come running. And talk about cause and effect. It worked perfectly. By swallowing his pride and showing he genuinely valued his advisors, King Zhao triggered a massive brain drain from rival states. Top strategic minds saw what was happening and absolutely flooded into Yan. He secured legendary figures. Yu Yi came over from Wei, Zhu Yan from Qi, and Zhu Xin from Zhao. King Zhao lived among his people, shared their hardships, and let these brilliant minds rebuild his state from the ground up. But you know, patience is definitely a weapon. It took 28 years of meticulous preparation, 28 years of building up a wealthy economy and a really well-trained army. Finally, the legendary General Yue led a massive coalition force that completely decimated their old enemy, Qi. They captured all but 3 of Qi's cities, totally looted their treasures, and burned their palaces and ancestral temples straight to the ground. Vengeance was absolutely served. Unfortunately, vengeance doesn't last forever, does it? Section 4. Desperation and annihilation. By this point in time, Yan's strategic judgment had kind of fallen off a cliff. They tried to be opportunistic, which backfired horribly.
Yan sent 500 gold to the king of Zhou to celebrate a treaty, but at the exact same time, they were planning a massive sneak attack because they assumed Zhou was weakened from previous wars. Loyal ministers were literally grabbing the king's robes, begging him not to do this, warning him it was doomed to fail. But the king ignored them, marched out, and his army was just humiliatingly routed by Zhao's veteran general Lian Po. They lost their commanders and, quite frankly, all their dignity. And that leads to this rapid domino effect of doom. With the terrifying state of Qin right at their borders, Prince Dan of Yan tries one final, desperate gamble. He sends an assassin, Jing Ke, to kill the king of Qin. It fails spectacularly, and that totally provokes Qin's ultimate wrath. Qin's army immediately swoops in and captures Yan's capital. King Shi is forced to flee to Liudong, and in this really pathetic attempt to appease Qin, the king actually executes his own son, Prince Dan. But of course, it wasn't enough. By year 33, Yan faced total annihilation and was completely wiped off the map. Having witnessed this wild 900-year cycle, let's step back for a second. Section 5. The secret to survival. I really want you to think about this question. How did the weak state of Yan survive for almost 900 years? Because if you look at a map of ancient China, Yan was relatively small. It was pushed up against barbarian tribes to the north, sandwiched between massive superpowers like Qi and Qin, and as we just saw, they were highly prone to horrific, self-inflicted political blunders. So how on earth did they last almost a millennium? Yet look at the data. They really did. They outlasted almost all of their peers. Out of all the states sharing the royal Ji family surname, Yan was literally the very last one standing. They held their ground through all the chaos for roughly 800 to 900 years before that final collapse. That kind of longevity in an era of constant warfare, that isn't just luck. Sima Quan, the legendary grand historian, argues that the secret to this astonishing resilience boils down to just one concept: Ren, or benevolence. It all goes back to the very beginning. That deep residual love for Duke Shaw's initial grassroots justice provided this invisible, powerful buffer of loyalty. When the government made catastrophic mistakes, the people didn't just shatter and give up. That cultural foundation of benevolence anchored the entire state, basically saving them from extinction time and time again. I'm going to leave you with this final, really powerful thought on the enduring legacy of true leadership. They still remembered the sweet pear tree. How much more the man himself? It is such a great reminder that political stunts and betrayals fade, but genuine care for your people echoes across centuries. If foundational values and simple justice can weather 900 years of war and chaos, I gotta ask you, what kind of roots are you planting